So welcome everyone to our latest Community Tech Tuesday. This Tech Tuesday, we are featuring working in the SOC with power tools, those power tools being Splunk and Polarity. So as always, welcome and thanks for joining another installation of our Community Tech Tuesday. We do these a few times a month. Be sure and get signed up at the URL on your screen. If you are not already a user of Polarity, you can sign up for our community edition at the Try Polarity link at polarity.io/Splunk. If you are not already a Phantom user, you can go to https://my.phantom.us/sign up. You can actually get signed up for both of those at the polarity.io/Splunk link that's on your screen. So with that, let's dive right on in. This week, I am super happy to welcome a colleague and someone I consider a very close friend, Tim Fraser from Splunk. He's a staff security strategist over there. Tim and I have had the pleasure of working together over the years in the security industry. I, of course, am your host. I run the field engineering team here at Polarity. So for those of you that aren't familiar yet with Polarity, what we've built is a platform that is effectively augmented reality for your data. And what I mean by that is we've built a platform capable of bringing together all of the contextual data that your tools are capable of producing for you by leveraging a method that we call computer vision, which allows us to OCR what's displayed on your screen, collect that relevant information, and present it to the analyst as it's displayed on their screen when they need it most as it's displayed. In addition to providing that contextual capability with all of the additional tools that you have, we also allow you to tap into a collective memory or collective intelligence that's been developed by everyone on your team. So in other words, if someone on your team sees something and they work to produce contextual relevance and information about a particular indicator or what we refer to as an entity, they can take a note or create what we call an annotation that is also then displayed whenever that entity or indicator is displayed on any other teammate's screen. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tim to tell you all a little bit more about Splunk, Splunk Enterprise, and Splunk Phantom.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. So yeah, like Swami said, I'm Tim Fraser here from Splunk. So let's talk about Splunk for a second. We're a data to everything platform. What do we mean by that? Well, we can answer any question bringing the data that you provide to do so. That may be in the realm of security, like we're going to talk about today, but it could also be within your IT operations, your DevOps, or your business analytics. The idea is that we collect all your various machine data, we put it into Splunk, and then give you the answers and the insights you need to take action on it. We can do that through two different deployment models, either on premises or in Splunk Cloud via our SaaS offering. So what would that data look like? The data we might get would be examples that you see on the screen, right? We could be pulling in data from a local file monitoring, starting in the upper right and going clockwise around. That would mean log files that are stored on your systems. We could collect any new logs that are populated there from your applications or from any sources. We can get the syslog natively from various devices like your network firewalls, your router switches, or we could take anything from your DevOps environment, your IoT, any containers, anything that can post to an HTTP endpoint, we collect that data. We could also get wire data, monitor your network traffic to and from certain servers, and then of course your event logs, Active Directory, OS statistics. All of this data would be coming into Splunk, and then we can also query various APIs or other sources for a variety of data. So the idea is that we can take any data, right? The bottom line is, what can Splunk ingest? Everything. So once we get all that data and we overlay some analytics to it, what do we want to do next? And that's where Phantom comes in. So once we've collected all the data, on the left-hand column there under Observe, we've oriented ourselves to it with an analytics layer like Splunk Enterprise Security for the security use case. We then need to take action and make decisions, right? And so that's where the right-hand side of this equation comes in. Whereas normally this would be a very manually intensive process where analysts would have to review the output of your SIM, like enterprise security, and decide what to do. Once you start to mature those processes, you can automate them through Phantom. The idea is then Phantom can take those additional investigative actions, use the results from those actions to make further decisions, and then take even response and containment actions. And then finally, you will then update back in either Splunk Enterprise Security to keep track of things, or you might want to push it to Polarity, like we'll show today, to help share that knowledge of what you've done with the rest of your team. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in to a demonstration. All right, so starting in Splunk, what I'm looking at here is the incident review screen of enterprise security. And what we would see is an example of some what we call notable events in the enterprise security framework coming in. Now, in this particular instance of enterprise security, I'm leveraging a methodology that we've recently started emphasizing in the last couple of years called risk-based alerting. Whereas we can take the output of many different notable events, consolidate them on a specific risk object. In this case, we're focusing in on a particular laptop called wrk-bton.frothy.local. So with this particular event, in order to investigate this, I might go through a series of manual steps, or I could pull it over into Phantom and do some automated investigation. And I'll show you what that might look like. So to get the information into Phantom, I've pulled it over from Splunk, and it will have a few key value pairs, a few fields that will be of interest. So then, normally this process would happen automatically, but I'm going to do it manually as we go through here so you can see the different parts of the process. So I'm going to run a playbook in Phantom that's going to kick off a few things down here, one of which is going to be pulling in additional artifacts. So you can see there would be some additional artifacts that populated with, in this case, the various threat objects that are associated with these. These could be suspicious processes or utilities that were used, IP addresses that the device in question was communicating with, or domain names. So then I'll run another playbook, which again, this whole process would be automatic normally, but I'm going to do this step by step so it doesn't go too fast. We're going to initiate a new set of playbooks, which will do some investigation on these various objects, right? So we'll do some IP reputations on these IP addresses. We'll do some domain reputations on these domains. And then we'll go ahead and collect some of this information, post it back to Splunk, consolidate it for the user to be able to easily see what's happening. Once that's done, at this point, I could either continue the investigation here or within Splunk ES. I can notice that as part of my playbook, I've found a suspicious IP address that communicates to, or I should say, there was a malware sample found that communicated to this IP address via VirusTotal. Once we get to this point, there's a couple ways we can go with this, right? One of the things I could do is I'm going to leverage my integration with Polarity to go ahead and annotate these various threat objects in Polarity and point to this event in Phantom so that anyone who sees these objects in another context will be able to be immediately linked back to this event in Phantom and see what's been investigated, right? So how would I do that? One of the ways I might do that is through a simple playbook that I've built called Annotate Artifacts. And what this will do is it will go through, in this case, and look at each one of these artifacts and annotate them, each one of these items with the Phantom event information. I can also, add this annotation action into any of my playbooks so that this playbook that I ran, for example, this IP investigate playbook, it just included 3 actions previously, but I have a different copy of it that I've added the annotate event, I should say annotate object action. There we go. So that when I run this, there's an update annotation. Now this same annotation that I've pinned to my heads-up display will show up in Polarity as well. So the idea there is now, if I do this, for instance, on demand lookup, and I look at this particular IP address, search it in Polarity, I'll see a couple things. One is this pin that I've just put up there that tells me some interesting information about what Phantom's done. And then I get this link back to the Phantom event that I'm looking at here, in this case, /37. So I could annotate this again using, some of Polarity's features down here to put information about it. Or if I'm another team member, I might be able to see, what I have done around this. So with that, I think that's the major parts of stuff I wanted to show. I know I went through that fairly quickly, but the idea is that, we're able to start in enterprise security, pull in information into Phantom, which does a variety of automations, right? Including creating new artifacts by running Splunk queries, doing some investigative tasks on those various artifacts, and then creating the appropriate annotations in Phantom so that wherever those show up, I can see them in the future and anyone on my team can see them. So with that, Swami, what would that look like if you were one of the other members on my team who started to see this?
Yeah, thanks for that, Tim. That's great. So just as Tim had pointed out, there's a couple of ways to get at the results of the data that you've annotated. Now, there's the manual means of creating these annotations, meaning you're going through your day-to-day work, you encounter some indicator or some entity that is of interest. You can manually select it. Let's say I just want to take this particular SSH key. I could, just with a quick keystroke, I could create an annotation, which then would be displayed anywhere on the screen. Or what we really want to talk about is this Phantom app that's running, that's capable of creating these annotations automatically. And what that does is allows me as another operator, let's say Tim's an automation security person who goes through and makes sure that everything that's encountered that's of notable structure in Splunk gets all the enrichment run against it, and then determines if it's of a threat score that's important enough to create those annotations. Once those annotations are made, let's say I'm working through just grepping through logs, looking through things on a command line. If I'm running Polarity in the highlight mode, whenever I encounter anything that had actually been annotated prior, it's going to highlight right on my screen, right in the command line itself. So as you can see, this particular IP address has highlighted in red as well as a light purple. And when I highlight over, or when I mouse over that highlight, I can see exactly what was done, what was produced. So I can see that exactly as Tim showed, this particular IP address is a command and control for malware with a greater than 3 score on virus total. I can also expand this out and see, okay, here is the actual table instantiation of this data right within Splunk. Now, I could configure a few other additional integrations and continue on down the path of corrective action. Or more importantly, I could just know right away, just regardless of where I am, that even on a command line, this particular IP address is one of concern. And I can also see very quickly who else has seen it. I can see that Tim, Fraser, and I are the people that have seen this particular annotation in this particular entity. It doesn't matter. Again, one of the things I just want to point out, I mean, Tim's already gone through most of the hard work by producing all of the contextual relevance around the entity itself and also creating the annotations, but it doesn't matter what the actual presentation of the data is. So whether I'm grepping through a log file on a command line, whether I'm working through a spreadsheet that has a whole stack of indicators that I might have gotten from a colleague, or let's say I'm even working through a PDF file that I got from a threat intel source that goes through and highlights everything that a particular APT does, and also calls out, hey, here are 2 decrypted command and control IP addresses. I now know that instantly we've encountered this IP address. I can see exactly where in Phantom it exists. I can also see right where it is in Splunk. So when I go back and I get back to the point where everyone almost always starts right at the source of data, when I'm looking through this in Splunk, I can now go back and see all of the risk analysis application that's come through RBA, but I can also see all of these different domains, all of these different annotations that were created, all of the different MITRE references, etc. So with that, what we're really trying to drive towards here is the full data lifecycle, right? So Splunk is the #1 tool for consolidating structured and, more importantly, unstructured data and helping you to make sense of it. But once you have made sense of it, you still have to consume it. And that's really where Polarity's augmented reality for that data really starts to show its power, is by giving you all of that contextual and collective intelligence as soon as that data is displayed, whenever it's displayed, and however it's displayed, right at the operator's screen. So with that, I've kind of covered all the stuff I wanted to cover. If you've got any questions, you can go ahead and enter them into the Q&A panel or into the chat panel. I'll get that open as well, just to make sure I've got it.
Yeah, and Swami, I'll take it back and talk about some of those playbooks that I ran for a second. I kind of skipped over that part. Let me do that.
Sure.
Pulling up questions. So the playbook that I mentioned that annotated all the various objects, right, is a pretty simple playbook. It's simply just formatting what I want to show up there, and then it's going through and annotating the various types of artifacts, right? But one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is the ability, of Phantom to use our visual playbook editor to really quickly and easily build out something like this once we have an app that can do these actions of, for example, with Polarity, annotating, right? So this action is updating an annotation on Polarity using the REST API there, so that I wouldn't have to necessarily manually update all those, right? And that's where, when I went through and ran that Annotate Artifacts playbook, it did it on each one of those items, right? So now, like we were illustrating and focusing in on that IP address, but at the same time, this would apply to any of these items, like the domain name, the process names, et cetera. They'll all have that same annotation associated with them. Then I mentioned also there's the Investigate IP playbook. This one, everything that you see down, other than this update annotation action, is what's happening as far as Phantom is investigating an IP address. So it's doing a reputation, a geolocation. This path is updating information back in Splunk. This pin is pinning it within the Phantom UI. And then this update annotation is what puts that particular annotation in the Polarity interface, right? So the idea there is the ability to quickly and easily automate what you want it to do, so that it's going to save you all that time from having to do things manually again.
Great.
All right.
Awesome. So let me just figure Zoom out, because it's not wanting to play nice with me right now.
So yeah, we could start answering questions. I think
So I do have several questions here. Once I figure out the sharing mode here, I'll go ahead and ask you a great question that came up. Is, can you explain a little more about Splunk RBA?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I kind of breezed through that, but this is a really important methodology that we've started, like I said, emphasizing in Splunk more and more. So whereas before we would be very focused on individual correlation searches that would find something of interest, right? Like for instance, here's an example, dynamic DNS activity detected, right? This would be, hey, some object or some entity, a laptop, an asset in your environment is communicating with a dynamic DNS host. Okay, that's interesting, but what do I do with that, right? Like, where do I go with that? And what other information could be interesting? This could be an isolated incident, or this device may actually be compromised. Well, with RBA, what we can actually do is take all of those individual correlation searches, and anytime one of them fires against an asset or a user, we can attribute a risk score to that user, to that asset, so that we can then mine that intermediate risk layer for interesting rules. So for instance, if we look at this top one here, we can look across larger time periods, across MITRE attack tactics, and we can say, hey, this system actually had 10 different risk rules fire, 5 different attack tactics associated with that. And then, that happened within the past 7 days, right? So this gives us the ability to do more advanced looks at our data, at our, events, and say, we've identified various attack techniques, 11 different ones that have spanned 5 different tactics. This is pretty indicative that this machine is likely compromised, right? And so when we expand that, we can see details on all of the particular things that happened, whether that was a suspicious command being run, a suspicious developer utility, a suricata alert associated with this device, a DNS query made to a very suspicious domain, right? So when we start to assemble all this activity associated with one specific host that we call the risk object, this really tells us that this is something worth investigating, right? So it helps us deal with that massive alert volume that we see all the time. And instead of getting a bunch of discrete, correlation search hits, we now then can consolidate those together across a specific risk object.
Awesome. So I got another question for you, and it's one that I'll take the first half and then I'll hand it over to you because it's one that's relatively open-ended, and I love open-ended questions. And that is, what are other use cases for Polarity and Splunk? And I'll take the first half of it and really point out the fact that, as I showed in my portion, it really kind of doesn't matter where we're consuming the data from. I mean, if it's being displayed on an analyst screen, we're going to give the contextual relevance and give all of the data that we know about it from an annotation or from an entity enrichment standpoint. So again, not being overly optimistic, but like Splunk being the top place to store data, it only makes sense that as an augmented reality for data, that would be the #1 place that you would consume Polarity's enrichment. Tim, you want to take the rest of that?
Yeah, I think, kind of one of the things that we maybe have glossed over slightly during this is you can, with the integration between Splunk and Polarity, hold on one sec, I'm trying to share something. There we go. I got it. So one of the things that this does, so in the green, or I should say in the purple first, with the annotations that we created as part of the Phantom playbook that we showed. In the green here is actually a integration with Splunk Enterprise. And what this will pull back is a saved query that you have. So what I did in this case was, and I'll illustrate some of it in both places, there is a way to look at the individual risk attributions here, to see more information about the specific things that fired in this RBA alert, for example. Now, this is one thing to view in Splunk, but it's another thing to have that right here, that if this is an interesting query, I saved this query that we see up here in the Splunk Polarity integration on the back end of Polarity, so that when I on demand put in this IP address, it will show the various associated pieces of information with that. So for instance, if I change that and I said, hey, I want to see what's going on with this, this will come back and start to find a similar idea for the query once that fires off, right? So we can see associated risk objects when we actually go through that. So that's another thing, is if there's a query that you find yourself running often, it's great to kind of stick that in and have that be one that fires on demand for any time you want to get it. Let's say if you're working in a different interface, or if you're, like Swami was showing, reviewing a threat report or something like that, and you want to be able to quickly kick that off every time.
That's great. That's awesome, Tim. That in fact answered one of the next questions up, which is, can I search within Splunk using Polarity? And that's absolutely right. I mean, Tim just showed you how to dig through it. The other thing is that you can actually build queries that you specifically want to use to dig and sift through the data within Splunk. So yeah, absolutely can search Splunk for using Polarity.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to get a 2 for 1 there, but
oh no, that's great, man. That's great. Again, it shows the power of the integration.
Yep.
Let me find my window here. So one more question for you, Tim. And again, this is a great open-ended one. What else can Phantom do? And I'll let you answer that one. I have a few ideas.
Yeah. So that is an open-ended one. So Phantom does a lot of stuff, right? And again, I kind of didn't want to get into too much specifics of it, but I'll just give a brief overview, right? Is that Phantom is a SOAR platform, security orchestration automation. It's designed to be able to let you orchestrate across your variety of tools in your SOC and orchestrate, I should say, and automate your workflows, right? So let's say you needed to pull events in from Splunk, like we were talking about, and then automate a series of tasks associated with that. We can do that. We can also ingest from, let's say, email or some other source, like if you have high fidelity alerts coming from another place and you want to automate, or ingest from ticketing platforms, right? So we have the ability to connect with over 300 different tools, pull events in, take investigative response actions. So basically anything you want to do in security operations, Phantom's designed to help automate, speed that up, and then provide an interface, kind of like I showed earlier, to, for your analysts to work out of, to make annotations, to make notes, to conduct a full-on investigation, as well as apply case management templates, we call them, which would be, the ability to have phases and tasks associated with things that need to be done. So we could put a workbook on here, have the ability to go through and do some associated tasks, maybe more manual stuff that we have to take care of, but, fully featured response platform designed to integrate with tools via APIs and do a lot of your process automation.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right. I've got one question that I think is going to be answered on the next slide. And I also got another great question, which is, can the solution overlay threat intelligence over Splunk while I'm doing incident response? And the answer is absolutely. Regardless of what that threat intelligence platform is that you're querying, on our GitHub repository, we have over 126 different, 127 integrations that we've already written so that you can take advantage of querying any data source or source of truth. For instance, Tim and I had misconfigured. We never took advantage of it during this demonstration, but if we had made our MISP instance our source of truth, whenever you were looking through Splunk, if MISP were to be whatever had a hit, let's say on IP address or a domain name or a file hash, whatever the actual indicator it is, it absolutely would overlay that information right there within Splunk, like it's doing on my screen right now. And there is another aspect to the question, which is, can it overlay asset information too? And I'll just oversimplify the answer for that. And again, to us, the data source is not as important as the display. So yes, absolutely. Like, let's say this particular IP address was an internal host and we wanted to look it up within some sort of a configuration management database. That information would also then be displayed over here with its own overlay card information, giving us all the relevant information about that internal host. And the next question, which is also a fantastic question, which will be answered in the next slide, is where can I get this Phantom app for Polarity? And the Phantom app for Polarity is on the GitHub that's at the bottom of this page. And the wait, I did it wrong. I always do this. The Phantom app for Polarity is available on the GitHub repository I just showed right here. At ours, you can just go there and pull down the Phantom repository. But the Polarity app for Phantom, which is what I think we were getting at, is this bottom link right here, which is github.com/TimFraser1/PH Polarity. So with that, we've gotten through all the questions. Be sure and get signed up if you haven't already to give Splunk and Polarity both a shot. You can do so for both right at the polarity.io/Splunk. I'd just like to take a second and thank my good friend Tim Fraser again for presenting with me today. Great job, Tim. It's always a pleasure to present with you.
Thanks, Swami. Pleasure's all mine. It was a lot of fun putting this stuff together and just highlighting the power, right? Because I think the big takeaway is that with these two tool suites together, there's just amazing power that analysts have at their fingertips. So it's a lot of fun.
Circular saw versus a back saw, right?
That's right. That's my analogy, and I like it. So
Awesome. Well, with that, everybody, have a great week. Be sure and get signed up for the next Tech Tuesday at polarity.io/community-tech-Tuesdays. Thanks, everybody.
have a good one.